It was a sunny day in November 1973, and the world of rock and roll was in for a delightful twist. The Beatles had gone their separate ways just a few years before, leaving fans grappling with the end of an era. But today, something surprising was happening. Ringo Starr, known as the steady beat and joyful heart of the Beatles, was about to release his third solo album, simply titled Ringo. People who had once seen him as just the drummer were in for a revelation. Starr was ready to make his mark, and he had enlisted the help of a few very familiar faces to make this album unforgettable. By the early 70s, Ringo had already ventured into solo territory, with mixed success. His first two solo albums had taken very different paths. One, a collection of standards, the other an attempt at a country sound. But with Ringo, he was stepping out with a true rock album, one that he hoped would capture not only his talent, but his personality. A blend of humor, warmth, and a bit of cheek. The album was crafted in Los Angeles, where Starr assembled a lineup of incredible musicians, including members of the band and famous producer Richard Perry, who had a knack for understanding what made artists tick. What made Ringo truly special, though, was that it brought something fans had longed for: a mini Beatles reunion. Although the Fab Four hadn't played together since the breakup, three of Ringo's old bandmates made appearances on the album. John Lennon, Paul McCartney, and George Harrison each contributed in various ways, from playing instruments, to lending their voices to background vocals, to even writing some of the songs. It was the closest thing fans would get to a Beatles collaboration in the 70s, and that touch of magic gave Ringo a distinct energy that set it apart. The album was not just a hit with fans, it was also a critical success. Songs like Photograph and You're 16 became standout tracks, showcasing Ringo's warm, raspy voice in a way that hadn't been fully appreciated before. These songs combined the best of 70s rock with Ringo's playful spirit, turning him from just the drummer into a solo star in his own right. The album climbed the charts and, for the first time, Ringo saw his name shining just as brightly as the other three Beatles. In the end, Ringo wasn't just a solo album. It was a celebration of friendships and memories, a way for Ringo to stay connected to his Beatles roots while stepping confidently into his own spotlight. This album wasn't just a nostalgic nod to the past, it was a statement of who Ringo Starr was becoming. It showed the world that he was more than capable of holding his own, armed with charm, musicality, and a few good friends. And so, on that chilly November day, the world got to know Ringo Starr, solo artist, and rock's endearing storyteller in a whole new way. As the world approached the tail end of 1980, ABBA, the Swedish pop powerhouse, was gearing up to release what would become one of their most defining albums. The air was thick with change, both for the group and the global music scene. Disco fever had waned, and a new wave of pop was on the rise. For ABBA, a band that had become a symbol of joy and sparkle, this album represented something deeper, more introspective. With the release of Trouper, ABBA didn't just deliver catchy beats and unforgettable melodies. They poured raw emotion and personal struggle into every song, creating an album that shimmered with nostalgia, heartache, and resilience. Behind the album's glossy cover and upbeat title track, there was a story that few knew at the time. ABBA was no longer the same band that had danced through the 70s in glittering outfits. The group had started as two couples, Agnetha and Bjorn, Benny and Annie Frid, bonded by love and music. But by 1980, those marriages had fractured. The album reflected their inner turmoil, exploring themes of love, loss, heartbreak, and the pressures of fame. Super Trouper wasn't just a collection of songs. It was a reflection of their private lives, shared with the world under the glow of the spotlight. The 1980s were a different era. With Margaret Thatcher in Britain, Ronald Reagan in the U.S., and a world cautiously stepping into a new decade, people were looking for anthems to both escape and ground them. ABBA's music delivered just that. As their international fame skyrocketed, their music became more than just entertainment. For millions, ABBA was a gateway to optimism, resilience, and a little bit of escapism. In Super Trouper, ABBA balanced the bittersweet realities of their personal lives with the universal joys of their music. They offered fans a front-row seat to their own emotional journeys, wrapped in their signature pop sound. Yet Super Trouper wasn't a farewell. It was a complex blend of hope, nostalgia, and reality. From its title track that radiated with an almost self-reflective irony, to the haunting echoes of ballads that hinted at past joys and future uncertainties, the album captured a mood both timeless and unique to its era. This wasn't the same ABBA the world had known before. They had evolved, layering their sound with maturity and an undeniable sense of honesty. The title track, with its upbeat rhythm, was an ironic mask for lyrics that hinted at the loneliness fame can bring. And as the final notes of Super Trouper settled into the world, ABBA's legacy grew. This wasn't just another pop album. It was a story told through music, an intricate mix of glamour and vulnerability that would resonate for generations to come. They took their place in history not only as pop legends, but as artists who, even in the face of change and personal upheaval, gave the world a piece of themselves. In the end, Super Trouper was not merely an album. It was a testament to ABBA's journey, a polished yet deeply personal glimpse into the human side of stardom, set to an unforgettable soundtrack. The year was 1970, and while the world was reeling from social change and cultural revolution, David Bowie was quietly crafting something that didn't just ride the current. It defied it. This wasn't the wild neon Bowie of the later 70s, but a darker, introspective artist starting to explore themes that would echo through his entire career. He'd soon be labeled everything from a rock star to a cultural icon. But for now, he was simply David Jones from Brixton, with an unquenchable urge to experiment and defy boundaries. In the eerie ambiance of London's Trident Studios, Bowie had begun to shed the folk sound of his earlier work, favoring heavier guitars and haunting melodies. This sound would come to shape the dark allure of the man who sold the world. To many, this album was Bowie's official leap into rock, thanks largely to guitarist Mick Ronson, whose powerfully gritty riffs were as much the backbone of this album as Bowie's own haunting vocals. Together, they crafted an unsettling, almost dystopian tone, one that questioned the structures of society and looked unflinchingly into themes of identity, mental illness, and war. And then there was the album cover. In the UK, Bowie appeared lounging in a long, flowing man's dress, designed by Michael Fish. This wasn't just a fashion statement, it was a direct challenge to societal expectations of masculinity. For Britain in 1970, seeing a man in a dress on an album cover was more than just striking. It was controversial. Meanwhile, over in the United States, the cover took a completely different direction. There, Bowie's image was replaced with a surreal, cartoonish illustration of a gun-toting cowboy and a Frankenstein-like creature. This artwork, unrelated to Bowie's appearance or style, added a bizarre but fitting layer of mystery for American audiences just discovering his music. This album arrived during a particularly intense era. The Vietnam War was ongoing, and protests echoed across continents as young people fought against rigid political and social structures. Bowie, an artist who had always felt somewhat out of place in the status quo, found himself perfectly positioned to channel these shifting sentiments. His lyrics dug into themes of alienation, grappling with the sense of self in a world that seemed to constantly shift. It was a heavy album for a turbulent time, one that resonated because it offered no easy answers, only deep questions. The Man Who Sold the World didn't make Bowie an overnight sensation. Far from it. But it marked the first time he truly became Bowie, an artist unafraid to explore the dark, twisty parts of human nature. This album set him on a path of continuous reinvention, where every song and every album would challenge assumptions, question norms, and, most of all, invite listeners into a world that only Bowie could create. And in the years to come, that world would expand, taking him from an underground sensation to a legend. In the early days of 1985, as music tastes evolved and pop stars vied for global attention, Elton John was about to make a bold move with his 19th studio album, Ice on Fire. This album marked a reunion with a familiar face, legendary producer Gus Dudgeon, known for shaping Elton's sound in the early 70s. With Dudgeon back at the helm, the stage was set to recapture some of that classic magic. Yet, Ice on Fire wasn't just a nostalgic throwback. It was an experiment with fresh collaborations and a journey into the uncharted territories of pop rock, capturing the spirit of a changing musical landscape. Recorded in the peaceful town of Cookham, Berkshire, at Saul Studios, Ice on Fire saw Elton experimenting with a blend of old and new. He bid farewell to longtime band members Nigel Olsson and Dee Murray, ushering in the talents of Scottish bassist David Payton and session drummer Charlie Morgan. These changes signaled a departure from the past, but Elton wasn't quite ready to let go of the familiar entirely. The album's foundation was still laid with Bernie Taupin's poetic lyrics, crafted into 10 unique songs that spoke of heartache, longing, and resilience. What truly set Ice on Fire apart, however, was the impressive lineup of guest artists. Unlike many stars of his caliber, Elton didn't rely on big names just for show. Instead, he brought in musicians who added unique flavors to the project. Queen's Roger Taylor and John Deacon lent their talents on drums and bass for Too Young, adding a layer of rock intensity. Meanwhile, George Michael, riding high on his own pop success, joined Nick Kershaw in harmonies on Nikita, a single that would soon become the album's crown jewel. Together, these artists contributed to an album that radiated both warmth and edge. Nikita captured listeners worldwide with its tender lyrics about an impossible love and a melody that left a lasting mark. The single climbed the charts, reaching number 3 in the UK, Elton's highest position in nearly a decade, and dominated charts across Europe. It even cracked the top 10 in the United States, proving that Elton's artistry resonated deeply across borders. The song became a defining track of the mid-'80s, showcasing a more introspective Elton as he explored new ways to tell timeless stories. Rounding out the album, the emotional ballad Shoot Down the Moon brought a sense of closure. leaning into Elton's gift for conveying deep emotion through haunting melodies. With Pino Palladino's evocative bass line, the song wrapped up Ice on Fire with the essence of a traditional Elton ballad, tender, reflective, and heartbreakingly beautiful. This album wasn't just another entry in Elton John's prolific career. It was a bold statement of resilience and evolution, capturing a legendary artist's journey through shifting musical tides. In a world where rock legends seemed unstoppable, one band dared to defy fate even after facing the unimaginable. It was November 6, 1995, when Queen released their 15th and final studio album, Made in Heaven, a hauntingly beautiful tribute and last goodbye from their unforgettable lead singer, Freddie Mercury. The album arrived like a message from beyond, as though Mercury himself had reached through the clouds to bring fans one last masterpiece. As much as it was an album of songs, Made in Heaven was a testament to love, resilience, and the spirit that doesn't falter, even in the face of great loss. This wasn't just an album, it was a collaboration beyond time and space. For years after Mercury's passing in 1991, the remaining band members, Brian May, Roger Taylor, and John Deacon, poured themselves into Made in Heaven. They took leftover vocals and recordings Mercury had left behind, transforming them into finished songs. Every note, every lyric was carefully woven together, blending Mercury's last recordings with newly crafted sounds. It was a task both thrilling and bittersweet for the band, as they labored to keep Mercury's voice alive, knowing it would be the final time they could work with their friend and musical partner. As if bringing Mercury back for one last performance, Queen infused the album with a wide emotional range, from joy and nostalgia to sorrow and hope. The cover itself reflected this emotional journey. Mercury, arms spread wide, looking toward Lake Geneva, as if embracing the heavens. The photo was taken at Queen's Mountain Studios in Montreux, Switzerland, where they'd often recorded together. The image seemed to capture Mercury in his element, forever part of the music and the memories they shared. Made in Heaven didn't just celebrate Mercury, it captured the essence of Queen's journey as a band. Set against the backdrop of the 90s, a time of shifting music styles and evolving tastes, Queen's final album dared to remind listeners of their legacy. It was a nostalgic nod to the power of rock, yet fresh enough to appeal to a new generation. The album charted at #1 in the UK, a testament to how deeply Mercury's voice and Queen's message resonated, even after his death. With Made in Heaven, Queen gave fans a sense of closure, but also a sense of infinite possibility. Though it marked the end of an era, the album's spirit lived on, proving that, in some way, legends never truly leave. Through the echoes of Mercury's unforgettable voice, Queen left a final reminder. Some sounds, some memories, last forever. On November 8, 1971, Led Zeppelin did something that left fans in shock and turned the world of rock music on its head. They released their fourth studio album, often called Led Zeppelin IV, without a title, no band name, and not a single word on its cover. The album, a mysterious blend of raw energy, mythical lyricism, and haunting soundscapes, quickly became one of the most influential albums of all time. Listeners could sense immediately that this wasn't just music. It was an experience, a journey into the shadowy corners of imagination and beyond. And no one saw it coming. least of all those who expected just another rock record. In the early 1970s, rock music was booming, but even in this rebellious, creative era, Led Zeppelin IV was something else. Tired of the media's critical eye and the cliches slapped onto rock bands, Led Zeppelin chose to let their music speak louder than any label or name could. They stripped away all the usual trappings. No title, no band name, no sign of anything recognizable. The album cover instead displayed only a simple image of an old man burdened by a bundle of sticks. This stark, cryptic presentation was a gamble, but it hinted at the power of the music inside. Zeppelin wanted to prove that great music didn't need gimmicks. It could stand on its own and stir listeners' souls. The album is famously diverse and complex, with each track a testament to the band's unique artistry. From the hypnotic and folky The Battle of Evermore to the blues-soaked When the Levee Breaks, each song brought its own flavor. But the crown jewel was Stairway to Heaven. This track was no mere rock song. It was an epic transcending genre, style, and even time. Beginning with a soft, almost ethereal guitar line, it grew into a fiery climax, pulling listeners into an emotional and mysterious journey. Robert Plant's haunting lyrics danced around themes of fantasy, life, and spirituality, making Stairway the unofficial anthem of a generation. Yet, Led Zeppelin IV wasn't just an album for the rebellious youth of the 70s, it was a statement of timeless defiance. Each song reflected the band members' personalities and their desire to break boundaries. Jimmy Page, the guitarist and mastermind behind the album, famously incorporated elements of folk, blues, and hard rock, blending them in ways no one else had dared. With Page's powerful guitar riffs, Plant's haunting vocals, John Paul Jones's intricate bass and keyboard layers, and John Bonham's thundering drums, Zeppelin crafted a masterpiece that pushed rock music's limits and redefined what an album could be. Today, Led Zeppelin IV is legendary, cemented as a milestone in music history. With no name, no label, and only raw talent and artistic defiance, Led Zeppelin created an album that wasn't just music, but a cultural phenomenon. It's an album that still captures listeners and resonates across generations, a timeless reminder of the audacious spirit of rock. In releasing Led Zeppelin IV, Zeppelin did more than leave a mark. They carved a place in music history that remains untouched, a testament to the power of art when it dares to defy everything but itself. In 2001, Paul McCartney stood at a pivotal moment in his life. Still grieving the loss of his beloved wife, yet embracing the possibilities of new love, the legendary musician poured his emotions into Driving Rain, his 12th studio album. With themes of heartbreak, renewal, and resilience, the album captured the raw essence of a man navigating profound change. Decades into his career, McCartney proved once again that his music could evolve with him, unafraid to experiment and reflect while staying deeply connected to his audience. In the wake of losing his beloved wife Linda in 1998, McCartney was beginning to rebuild his life, finding a new partner in Heather Mills. These contrasting emotions, grief and renewal, are etched into the music. Back in the Sunshine Again, co-written with his son James McCartney, is a testament to familial collaboration and healing. This personal touch gave the album a warmth that resonated with listeners. September 11, 2001, proved to be a defining moment for Driving Rain. McCartney was sitting on a plane in New York City when the terrorist attacks occurred, watching the events unfold from his seat. The experience left him shaken, but determined to respond. Out of this tragedy came Freedom, a song that echoed defiance and unity, capturing the spirit of resilience that defined both the artist and the time. This track became an anthem of hope, adding a global dimension to an otherwise intimate album. Recorded at Henson Recording Studios in Los Angeles with producer David Kahn, the album was a departure from McCartney's usual meticulous style. He opted for a looser, improvisational approach, often relying on first takes to retain the music's raw energy. This process allowed the album to mirror McCartney's mindset, unpredictable, candid, and eager to embrace the moment. Tracks like the title song Driving Rain embody this creative spontaneity, giving the record an unvarnished charm. Though it wasn't a commercial juggernaut, Driving Rain carved its place in McCartney's story as a project of resilience and reinvention. It reflected a man who, despite personal losses and global upheavals, channeled his emotions into music that was authentic and hopeful. From deeply personal collaborations to global anthems, Driving Rain remains a reminder of McCartney's enduring ability to connect with listeners through the universal language of music. It was a crisp November day in 1974, and the world seemed to hum with a strange kind of anticipation. Across the Atlantic, London's grey skies mirrored the subdued excitement of a city about to witness yet another ripple from the Beatles' lingering legacy. Meanwhile, in Los Angeles, a certain ex-Beatle was putting the finishing touches on a project that was unmistakably his own. Ringo Starr, the man once tucked behind a drum kit, was now front and center, ready to unleash Goodnight, Vienna, his fourth studio album and a confident stride into his evolving solo career. Ringo had always been the underdog, the quiet anchor in a band of giants. But 1974 was proving that even the most unassuming stars could shine brightly in their own right. The world had already seen his charm in his earlier solo hits like It Don't Come Easy and Photograph. Now, with Goodnight Vienna, he was aiming to mix his wit, warmth, and an unmistakable flair into a cohesive record. And this wasn't just any record. Ringo was working with a mix of rock royalty and old friends. From John Lennon, who wrote the infectious opening track, to the legendary Billy Preston and Elton John, the album promised a glittering ensemble of collaborators. But Ringo's journey to this point hadn't been all smooth sailing. The early 70s were a tricky time for the Beatles' faithful, as fans struggled to make sense of their fractured idols. Each member was carving out a unique identity, and for Ringo, the challenge was to step out of the shadow of his own past. Goodnight Vienna wasn't just an album. It was a statement. It reflected his personality, cheeky, approachable, and brimming with optimism, even when life threw curveballs. The title itself, slang for It's All Over, was both ironic and endearing, a nod to the humor that had always set Ringo apart. The recording sessions were as lively as the music itself. Set against the sprawling backdrop of Los Angeles's iconic Sunset Sound Studios, Ringo took the reins with surprising ease. While he didn't write most of the songs, his touch was unmistakable. A drummer's precision mixed with a showman's soul. Lennon's energetic contributions like It's All Down to Goodnight Vienna blended seamlessly with Ringo's playful spirit, while covers like the Platters' Only You and You Alone showcased his knack for reinventing classics with sincerity and charm. As the album dropped on November 15, 1974, the world got a glimpse of Ringo Starr, not as the fourth Beatle, but as a solo artist with his own rhythm and swagger. Goodnight, Vienna wasn't just music. It was a snapshot of a man embracing change with open arms. For those who tuned in, it wasn't about comparisons or charts. It was about Ringo reminding everyone, in his own endearing way, that sometimes the best surprises come from the most unexpected places.